Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week on Tent Talk, we're talking about market fees, how to structure fees, how to establish fair rates, and what to do if you need to increase your fees. Hey, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active Farmers Market Manager, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer and marketing director for Farmers Market Pros.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by MarketWurks, providing a single, multifaceted online platform to manage your markets, schedule your farmers and vendors, create market maps, and maintain up-to-date data on attendance, space rent, sales, and more. Give up that stuffed 3-ring binder and free up your time. Click the MarketWurks logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com to get started today.
Welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. This week we are discussing all that goes into setting your farmers market fees.
Is that like the commonest question most common question we get asked ever, all the time?
God, yes. People are constantly approaching me like, what does it cost to set up here? Like, what does it cost? What do I have to pay you to have a booth here?
Is there a fee to be here, to put a tent here? Is there a fee?
Like, it's not a garage sale. Get out of here.
Yeah, I probably get that question like 5 to 8 times a day at the info booth at the market.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yep. And I know they're not really, maybe sometimes they are, but they're asking, like, what do they have to pay us? But then I always want to say, like, there's a lot of other investment involved. It's not just, like, what you pay the market manager. Like, there's a lot of other things you have to pay for and invest in permits and equipment and all that stuff before you set up. But that's such a long conversation. It's like I can't even do it right now. It's just...
Because we're busy at the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I go, take vendor 101.
Yeah.
Call me
That's
later.
right.
But this is also, I'd say, one of the most common questions we get from market managers is how to set those fee structures,
what should I
fee
charge?
Percentage, what's fair. So that's what we're getting in today.
I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We talked a little bit about this at the conference, actually.
Yes, Kat did a wonderful presentation about this at the very end of the last day.
She made everybody wait for it.
Yeah.
That's right. Going to build up to it.
Got to make them stick around. But yeah, it was I feel like it was a dynamic conversation because a lot of market managers and the participants that were there had some questions and feedback, and it was interesting hearing how they structure their fees. Usually I'm like, you charge what now? Like, you charge $5 for the season and you're here because your market's going to close because you don't have any marketing money? Well, let's circle back. Let's round this conversation out.
Yeah,
we did have that segment of the,
Yes.
the session. That's true. Because I am always amazed by that when I hear, we'll see in our Farmers Market Pros community, we'll hear somebody say, well, what are you charging for fees? We're charging $35 for 13 weeks. Like, I don't understand that. How do you afford your insurance and your staff and all those things?
But it was great to have that conversation because then a couple of the managers said that, okay, that's their rate. It was kind of a low rate for the season. But they also charge like a startup or like a membership fee.
Like an annual membership.
An annual membership. So that was extra revenue. So that's really smart. And also if someone doesn't come for their seasonal spot, like if they're out one week, they can put in like a sub-bedder, so then they're getting double that rate for the day. So that's also smart. So that kind of made it make a little more sense in my brain. So
there's there's like endless ways that you can do it. For sure. But today we're going to kind of talk about what we do and why we do that, and maybe some ways that you can streamline your fee structures, or if you're thinking about increasing your fees, how to do that in a way that doesn't alienate everyone in your market, and kind of how to communicate that to people. So
yeah, for sure. And it's nice to have vendor input on that too. And Justine can speak as a vendor. And I know we've talked to other vendors about like how different fees work at different markets, not just ours, but vendors that are in our markets, but then participate in other markets that have different fee structures, how it feels from the vendor side too. Because you want to just kind of keep that conversation going.
Yeah, and you don't want a structure that's so esoteric that it doesn't make sense to anybody, and something that is easy. I feel like kind of no matter what your rate is, if you can easily explain it, it kind of takes some of some of the pain out of that price.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to get a big slideshow out to present how your fee structure
structure
is. Yeah,
works.
should be able to explain it in 2 minutes or less.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the big points I tried to make at the conference when we were talking about this is that I think a lot of managers get really worked up about, if my fee's too high, farmers and vendors won't come, or it's not fair to the farmers if my fees are too high. Mm-hmm. When in fact, if you add up what it costs a farmer or a vendor to be at the market, fees are way at the bottom of the list with that space rent. I mean, what it costs them to be there is the cost of production, what it costs to grow that food that they're putting on their tables or bake that bread that they're selling, what it costs to staff their booth. Sometimes when you got farmers coming in from as we say, from the farm to the city, you've got fuel costs and transportation costs and their time away from the farm. And the big one, the big cost for everybody that does perishable food, whether it's farmers or bakers or hummus or what have you, their big cost is spoilage. If they bring stuff to the market and then it doesn't sell and they don't have a market the very next morning, and sometimes even if they do, if you got things like leafy greens, it's probably not going to roll over. It's that loss of what they've put so much money into producing. That's what really costs them. And then somewhere way down on that list is the actual rent for their space. It's not the breaking point. That's not what's going to do them in. So, our basic kind of an umbrella overview of this is you need to charge enough that you can create a market that's really vibrant. You have the tools to do marketing and arrange a market and staff a market that is going to be busy so that those folks make more sales. That's what's fair to them.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have a market where you're doing all of those things and your farmers and vendors can see with their own eyes, you have a tangible evidence of marketing, of bringing in shopper count. We don't get a lot of complaints about our market fees.
We really
don't.
Because
we do a great job of using those fees to their best ability. We use every penny of the fees to reinvest into the market and make it a great market. That's how good business works. So, if we took $5 from everybody, great, they wouldn't have to pay that much. But the market we couldn't pay Justine to do social media. It couldn't pay me to do email newsletters. That market would not be what it is.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just sometimes it has to be explained a little bit.
Yeah. So that's a really great segue into when you're considering your market fee, what does that money go towards?
Yeah, what's your starting point? Yeah. So you have to base fees, obviously, on what it's going to take you to operate the market. Now, some markets are funded by other things as well as their space rent, especially if they've got a really small market. No matter what you're charging for rent, and you can't charge too much, if you've got 12 or 15 vendors at your market, which is perfectly acceptable in some situations, some community sizes, you're probably not going to be able to generate enough in just space fees to do a really good job of marketing the market and operating the market and paying your own insurance and overhead, your staff costs. So you have to take that into account. And some of those markets operate then by also getting sponsors, or they're a function of the municipality itself. So it's just an overall city overhead kind of cost, or they get a grant. So sometimes, especially in an area where there's not a lot of grocery stores and there's some food apartheid or things where people are not getting fresh food there's a lot of grants available that can help you. And that can subsidize your space fees. You can keep them a little bit lower that way. So that's one way to do it. If you're trying to operate a market that's totally funded by space rent, as ours is. We get the occasional sponsor and things, but we fund our markets. They're self-supporting. They have to be financially sustainable on their own. It's just the kind of groups that we partner with. In fact, they should have a little bit left over as fundraising for the community that we work with. That's our model. We have to make sure that we charge enough for space rent to cover our staff, their benefits, insurance. At the big market, the guys that come out and monitor traffic so the shoppers don't get hit crossing the street because it stretches over many blocks. And then a hefty amount for marketing, because that's what brings the crowds in. That's what creates the sales for the farmers and vendors. And that's the key thing for them.
Absolutely. And just those basic static fees, like our permits, we have to pay for those. That's not going to go anywhere. Our insurance, and we're in California, so insurance is, a whopper. That's not going. We have to pay for that. Like barricades, like hard equipment costs. Those are things that we just have to have. It's not like, we can do a little extra social media or not. It's like we have to have this barricade right here, so we have to purchase that. So all of those kind of hard costs that go into operating a market, that has to come from somewhere. And sponsors do kind of subsidize that a little bit, but really our markets are funded by our farmers and vendors fees that they pay. So we have to, I mean, I think Brian Koppman made a really good point when he was talking about budgets at the conference, where it was like, you can't just like pick a number out of thin air. You can't just be like, oh, okay, this vendor probably can only pay $25, so that's what the vendor fee is.
Yeah.
You need to write down all your costs. You need to write down all your expenses and all the hours that you're putting into like making your market happen. And that's where you need to draw your vendor space fee number from. It needs to be on paper, and you can't just pick a number, because you're going to end up in a situation where we see some vendors do sometimes where it's like, oh, I think this cookie, I could sell it for $1. It's like, okay, well, you're putting $2 worth of ingredients in that cookie. So how are you ever going to make money? Your market's going to fail, pretty quickly if you're not pricing your vendor fees right, if that's how you're funding your business.
Well, and it's interesting that you brought up the cookie equation, because that's exactly how you have to figure this out. It's just exactly like pricing your cookie or pricing your carrots. You have to look at what the costs are for you to produce those things. And then you also have to look at what the market will bear, what your local standards are. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a cookie that costs $2 to produce, but you're in an area where people are perfectly comfortable paying $5 for a quality cookie, you're great. That's good. Mm-hmm. If you're in an area with a really low-income demographic and there is no way they can afford, a $4 cookie, you're going to have to adjust your cookie recipe or make it smaller or use a different level of ingredients so that you can get your price to what the market will accept. And setting market fees is a little bit the same way. If you're producing a really big market, if you're in an area that has the potential to bring in so many shoppers that no matter what you charge for space fees, it's going to be fine because they're going to do so many sales, you can do that. If every market in your area is charging half of what you need to charge to operate that market, you're going to have to look at your cost to operate the market and whether you can adjust those, because folks probably aren't going to pay double the amount of every other market's fees, at least not at the beginning, not until you build that big shopper base.
Yeah. And this kind of leads into the next question of like how you set your fee. Is it a flat fee or percentage? This is what really makes I'm unsure how markets that operate on a percentage fee. Like, how do you know how much you're going to get if it's a percentage? And I don't know. That just confuses me.
This is actually how Bridget used to explain this at Vendor 101. I finally said, you know what? They're not going to get it if you explain it like that, and they're not going to care. But she would say, we use a flat fee because we want to know how much is coming in so we know how much we can spend. It was a logical budget approach.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't charge a percentage. But we also have a bunch of other reasons that we choose to charge flat fees at our market. One of them is that we want to be able to have farmers and vendors that are selling really high quality products that might not have a big margin. Mm-hmm. So if their rent goes up based on their gross sales, which is how I've never seen a percentage market that charges people for their net income, a percentage of their net income. It's always on their gross sales. You're sort of discouraging awesome lower priced products because you don't want to take those into your market and use up space because they're not going to generate any rent for you on a percentage rent. You're also discouraging people who produce wonderful high priced items but don't actually have a big margin and aren't going to produce more net than the guy who's selling kind of a mediocre product. So those to me are two good reasons to not go with a percentage. There's a few other good reasons. I don't want to monitor people's sales. I don't want to suspect that they're fibbing. It's giving me a bad feeling about them.
We always say vendors that pay percentage just make liars out of the nicest people because like, why wouldn't you just budget a little bit, And I don't want to always be suspecting my farmers and vendors of not giving me accurate numbers. So
yeah, we just didn't want to have that kind of relationship with them. So for us, a flat fee made more sense. A lot of percentage markets charge a base against a flat fee or plus, saying that wrong. They charge a base, which is a flat fee, and then they do that against a percentage and you pay whichever is higher, or they charge a base plus a percentage, or I've heard other schemes where it's plus a percentage if you do over X amount. And it can get really complicated when you're talking about doing a slideshow to explain your fees. You don't want to make it too complicated. We do go with a flat fee. I totally get markets that say, well, a percentage fee is sharing the risk. So if you've got a busy market, everybody benefits. If you're not making a lot of sales, everybody suffers together. And I get that.
Yeah.
But then I also have seen market managers that curate differently because they're motivated to take in vendors that have products that will generate a lot of percentage because it's a high-priced product. Sometimes it's resale. They sort of adjust their criteria for accepting vendors because they have to go with somebody that's going to generate a high percentage rent.
Yeah, it's hard to curate to, so specifically if you're looking for that. And we get vendor inquiries, too, that come to us because I think we're the only market group in town that does a flat rate. So everyone else in San Diego is charging a percentage. So we get vendor inquiries from vendors that are at other markets saying, I bring in a lot of sales, so I'll give you a really high percentage. So, you should let me in your market because I'm going to pay you a lot to be there. And I'm like, huh?
Which
that's
is
not...
also like a weird, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a weird
approach to
approach.
take. I mean, our approach is with all of our vendors is the quality of your product, the quality of your professionalism, what does the longevity of your business look like to us?
The balance of your product against our other mix.
Yes, and we don't want to add another person in a already topped out category just because you're going to bring in a lot of money, which I could feel like market managers might be tempted to do because it might bring in a lot of money at the percentage market. So, I mean, on the other side, we have our farmers that do thousands and thousands of dollars every market. They're like, we love your guys' rate. We pay this other market, hundreds of dollars more each day that we're there. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. That would be nice because I can see you're doing a lot of sales. So it's, a balance. You got to figure out what's right for your market and what you can handle, paperwork-wise. I don't know. It boggles my mind that people have to turn in forms at the end of the market and tell you how much they sold for the day, and then you're doing math after you've been on the market for 9 hours. That just makes my head want to explode. But I mean, I guess that's the system that they have set up for that. It's one way that you can collect market fees.
When I was a vendor, I liked the flat fee just because I knew that's how much I paid. Mm-hmm. I don't have to have my husband do math and write a check. I can say, here's the check for you. It's signed and ready to turn in. Yeah. So it was just it was a fixed cost for me too. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to worry about it as much. Yeah, I could prepay. Mm-hmm. And then also for us, it was kind of a good benchmark of okay, we have to make this much to be here. Mm-hmm. And if we're not making this much, something's not working, we need to change, or maybe this isn't the right market for us. Yeah. And I think that's a little harder to do if it's a percentage market because typically that base that you have to hit is pretty low. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I'm kind of just a planner anyway, so I liked to know how much I was going to pay.
You can plug that into your budget right across, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like people who have jobs that are commission-based. It's like that. I could never do that. I need to plan out my, income. But really, you could have those days where it's a lot. You could hit those big sales and stuff. So that's kind of a risk taker kind of business model, which could really work for a lot of people. So, I mean, it just depends on how you want to structure things out. I know we like to plan our budget, and we need to know how many, we want to max out all the vendor spaces at our market. We want to have a flat rate for each of those spaces so we know what the income's going to be, mm-hmm. and we can plan we can hire staff according to that, and we can give them, a high pay according to that, and make sure that everything's, paid for ahead of time. I don't know. And then we can charge fees before people even get there. Because I feel like at percentage markets, do some vendors forget to do that and leave? And then you get a text
message or emails or the next week you're just hey, we didn't get your slip for last week. And then you have to dig through your money box. I mean, it is, I'd say, I could definitely understand in some areas where it's just it is a kind of a low tech analog way
mm-hmm.
of doing things, which probably really works great for some market managers and some farmers. It is kind of you write, you just write it down on a little slip of piece of paper and it works. But it also makes collecting fees at the market. It's you have to walk up to the market manager and mm-hmm. hand them the cash and. So if you are wanting to process credit card or stuff like that, it seems like that might be a little bit more
gets complicated.
Yeah.
And I always feel like it doesn't cost us anymore to service a vendor that's selling a high amount.
Yeah.
So, why would we charge them more just because they're selling more? So when you say that you share the risk and then you share the rewards, I've also heard vendors, Christopher in Gilbert, who says, why should you make more money because I worked harder and made a better product and have a better sign and my salespeople I spent a lot of money training? Why should the market manager get more for that or the market?
I do feel like that's completely my mindset when I explain our fee structure to vendors and when we teach Vendor 101. It's I want you to be as successful as possible. I want you to work so hard every day that you're at the market, and I want you to like break your sales record every time you come to the market, because that's your business, and I want to see you succeed. And I don't want you to feel like I'm standing over your shoulder, like tapping you on the shoulder, like give me my slice of your hard work. When I work hard as well, but it just feels like a kind of weird relationship we start having with the vendors where it's like, oh, you're busy. Like, excellent. I get a piece of that, And also on the other side of it, it's like if someone doesn't feel like doing a great job and they're kind of like, goofing off in their booth, or they don't have their setup, or they didn't bring enough inventory, and they're like, well, it's just me. Like, my percentage will be low. And it's like, I don't want to.
We don't want to suffer for that.
I don't want to suffer for that either.
Because it's still costing us the same amount to service that booth, to provide them the marketing, to provide them the staff time.
And I feel like if they, like Justine said, if you have to reach a certain amount of rent, if like your goal is to like at least pay the rent and take some money home, you're probably going to work a little harder, as opposed to like, oh, I don't feel like it today, I'll just take the hit and I'll just pay a little low fee to be here. You just get like a little more energy out of your vendors, I would think. So that's another reason to do it that way. I mean, I've never worked a percentage market, so maybe I'm way off, but that's just kind of how we have talked about structuring our fees that way.
So, a lot of people do it. Mm-hmm. I will say, when you're talking about farmers that make thousands of dollars, you look at that, and then you look at a little young farmer that's starting out, doesn't have much land, can't bring a lot of produce. They're not going to make that much. Your flat fee doesn't have to be the same for everybody.
Yeah. This is something that I think blew a lot of minds at the conference. They're like, what?
So when people ask us at the market, like, what's the booth fee? And I'm like, well, it's
what
different. What do you sell? Like, tell me specifically what you sell. And then are you going to come in as a substitute? Are you going to be here every week? Like, is it – we don't host resellers at our market, but – just like how close to the dirt are you? That's kind of how we scale our vendor fees. So there's a lot of like follow-up questions to that question that I get. And we have a tiered system for what we charge for vendors.
Yeah. So we have a tiered system. In our case, we have a strong feeling that shoppers follow the farmers, and that other vendors follow the shoppers.
Yeah.
So we definitely are engaged with making our market as attractive as possible to farmers.
Yep.
Now, maybe you're in an area where that's not true. Maybe people are coming to your market because they really want prepared food, in which case maybe you're shaping your market to subsidize the prepared food people a little bit, the hot food vendors. Mm-hmm. But for us, it's the farmers that we're pushing. So our smallest farmers have absolutely the smallest rate that anybody in the market has. Larger farmers pay a little more because they take up more space. Mm-hmm. And, we're always dealing with a finite amount of space, so that's what things are based on. Grocery vendors that are using local ingredients pay a little bit more than farmers. Hot food vendors pay way more than farmers, and so do craft vendors. We have a small percentage of craft and art vendors, and they pay more. Now, if you were having an art festival, it may be the artists that you're subsidizing, or the people doing really original art that are right from your area. So you decide what your fee structure is going to be, and it can vary. And we actually go kind of even more granular than that. If I've got somebody applying in a category that's very full, they may be at a higher flat rate than the existing vendors that are in that category, because without that little incentive, it doesn't make sense to me to add one more person that's selling baked goods, for instance. So it's we have a whole point system that informs both our application process and our fee process that says, you get points for differentiation. Your product is way different from somebody else. In some situations, you get points for diversity because we're trying to establish a more diverse vendor base. So you get some extra points for that. You get points for being a hyper-local farmer as opposed to a farmer that's 6 miles north of us in the state, where we do get farmers from there. So it doesn't have, just because it's a flat fee, it doesn't mean it's the same flat fee for everybody in the market.
Right.
It's not like $60 for a 10-foot by 10-foot booth.
Yeah, no matter what you sell. It's not like that.
It's not like you can just have that and do whatever you want inside of the booth. It's like we curate our markets. Like, we are very heavy on the curating. And we live in an area, and we are in a city that we have a lot of choice. We have, we don't have as many farmers as I'd like, but we have a very dense population of farmers in the state of California. So we get a lot of farmers that come and want to be at our markets. We have a lot of small businesses. We're in a very creative, food centric city, and so we get a lot of really great food vendors that want to be a part of our markets. So like Kat was saying, if you're in an area where maybe there's less farmers, or there's less even people doing farmers market businesses, you might need to like structure your fees differently to appeal to them and to be a draw for them to participate in your market.
Yeah, or to make your market more accessible to Black and brown farmers or immigrant farmers, or, that's another way that you can make your market more diverse or pull in different populations of vendors too.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that's a really great point, and this is something that we did discuss at the conference as well. You need to sit down and do your budget and put your hard numbers in there, every single number. You need to pay yourself if you're in a paid position. You need to pay yourself if you're in a volunteer position and can't sustain it anymore. You need to write that number in there. And then you need to make your market fee structure rules, and you need to make them very clear for yourself and make them very clear for other people that are applying so you can explain it to them. And then you're in charge of your market. And you can stick to that. If you're running your own market, you can say, hey, we give incentive pricing to Black and brown farmers because that's a quality that we are an anti-racist market, and we are working at bringing Black and brown farmers into our market. And so we have a fee structure for them to pay. And that's how I set up my fee structure. And if you have a problem with it, you don't have to participate. This is a you apply to me situation. So if you don't want to be in my market, that's fine. It's cool. If you're maybe participating in a city-run market or something a little more formal than that, you might have to look at where your rules can stand. But think about what your mission statement is for your market and base your fee structure on that. Yeah. And you can do that. We empower you. And you can do it.
And let's send everybody a permission slip.
Yeah.
You can say, the Farmers Market Pros gave me permission to do this.
That's something that I think about a lot when I'm in the info booth and people ask me, hey, how much does it cost to be here? I say, we're a farmer-centric market. We're a food-centric market. So farmers pay the least, and it works up from there. So depending on what you want to sell, that just really depends. And I can kind of see like light bulbs like click for people a little bit where, then at the end they tell me, oh, well, I want to sell earrings. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Sometimes we do have occasional substitute spaces, but they kind of realize like, oh, this might not be the market that I want to start my business in. Yeah. I might drop in here for Christmas markets or, and I think that that's just, it's a kind of a clear way to explain to people what your market is about. If it comes down to like hard dollars of like, oh, okay. And
giving them a background, I feel like helps them.
Yeah.
Sure. It helps ease the blow of like, a soft no to you instead of just like, no, you can't come, or no, we don't accept vendors. Like you like have a little short spiel ready where you can kind of explain the philosophy of your market and the type of vendors that you're looking for. And that helps people understand that. And we have had vendors that have had like a particular like product line in mind, or even something that they've started. And we kind of explained like what our shoppers like to buy at the market and why we're here. And they've kind of made adjustments to their product line in order to fit into our market like curated situation. So maybe they can work with you a little bit on that and make it so, okay, they're using more local ingredients. They're getting extra points for that. They can come in on a substitute basis and not every week, so they can actually get in and participate every once in a while. So things like that, like be open to working with your vendors and farmers and have that structure set up so you're not making it up on the fly. Yeah. Because let me tell you, like some rule, Kat and I have been like, oh, should we do this? Okay, yeah. And we haven't really got real firm on it. And then it's just been like, okay, we can't explain this, so we're not doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think just like everything that happens at the market, clear communication and consistent expectations and enforcement that's what makes it all run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just stick to it.
So after Kat's presentation at Intense, I think a lot of people realize like, okay, I shouldn't be charging $5 a season. Like it's looking like, I have the permission to increase my market fees and it would benefit everybody. So, what do market managers do out there if they're looking at their budget and they're realizing, wow, I could do so much more with marketing if I had $10 a week more for my farmers, or, I could buy a new info booth tent if I charge $5 more a week. So how can market managers approach raising market fees? How do you do that in a way that doesn't make everybody freak out?
Yeah. And it's communicating it and giving them some notice and things. What will inspire you, though, is exactly what you're saying. So if you have 40 vendors in your market and you raise fees by $10 a week, what could you do with that $400 a week? You could pay somebody to help you out with social media and really pump up your social media accounts. You could print 2,000 flyers that you got out to local businesses and coffee houses and moms groups and got more people to the market. There are so many things you could do with that money that will immediately come back to your farmers and vendors. And if their average sale is $5 or $10 and they're making 4 more sales that week because of the things that you've just done, the return on investment for them is going to be so obvious that I think everybody will be happy. That we rarely get pushback, actually, on raising fees. Now, we do get very clear about it. We tell them insurance has gone up. We don't want to have to pull money out of marketing to cover that. We want to make sure that we're really pumping up marketing this season so you get lots of sales. So we are going to have to raise our fees. And we don't do it whimsically. We don't do it 3 times a year. We typically raise fees. We analyze it once a year.
Okay.
And we look at whether or not we're going to raise fees. And we typically do that in a very busy season. Because
smart.
People
are making money.
That's right. They're already busy. We know
July.
Exactly right. We know there's a couple of times a year when things are just a little off, right? When school
Happy National
starts.
Farmers Market Week. Rents are going up.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You're
or usually right before that. July is in fact my mantra. Whereas I wouldn't raise fees in, say, January, which is a time that a lot of vendors are reevaluating whether they want to move forward with their businesses. It's just when people make new transition decisions. That's not a time to put something on the con side of farmers markets and say, fees are going up right now.
So be strategic about it.
Right. So we usually do it at a really busy time of year. We usually give people 30 to 60 days notice that fees are going up. So in our regular vendor advisories, we'll say, we're evaluating the budget for this year. We want to make sure that our marketing budget stays strong. We have some other costs that have gone up. We are going to have a fee increase this year. A lot of times I'll say, you'll remember that we haven't raised fees in the last 2 years, which happens because some years we don't raise fees. Or we haven't had a fee increase in 12 months if you're going to do it every year. But we are going to have a nominal fee increase now. It is going to be $10 more a week starting July 1st. So that gives them time that if you do have a vendor that's making their decision based on what the fee is, they have plenty of time to find a different market, to adjust their business. You're not saying, hey, I'm raising your fee next week, and they feel like they have so much inventory that they're stuck. So you want it to feel good to them, too. So we give them plenty of notice. When we increase rates, we're typically changing them for everyone, although I will say that usually with new markets, we will do sort of an entry rate for people that commit to being in a new market for 20 consecutive weeks. And they help us build that shopper trust that creates a good customer flow. And a lot of times those vendors will keep that intro rate for the first 2 to 3 years. Because they helped us build. They took that risk. They went through some slow days. Exactly right. They went through some slow days while things were building up, and we feel like they should get a little boost on the way back. But eventually, I will also go back to them and say, oh, it was so awesome that you helped us get started. It's been wonderful to have you here. We haven't applied the last 2 fee increases to your rates, but this year everybody's going to go up by $5. And I have never had anybody push back on this.
No.
It's been amazing. I think the fear of raising fees or charging a fair amount to farmers and vendors is really way more in market managers' heads than it is in the farmers and vendors' approach.
And like Brian said at the market or at the conference, we are really nice people. Farmers market people are nice, fuzzy people that want to help each other and hold each other's hands. So it's that does get in our head where we're like, oh, we're too nice to raise the fee. And you have to kind of stop thinking about that because we're all, yes, we can still be nice. We're all nice. The vendors are, the farmers are, we are. And we can still want to have profitable businesses for everybody.
For everybody involved. And I think by being in our own heads about, it'd be mean to raise the fee, we're not giving our farmers and vendors enough credit.
Yeah.
We're protecting them, and in that way, we're inhibiting their chance for success. And I think we should give them more credit for having the business sense to understand that if you invest a little more, you will likely make a lot more.
Yeah.
Give them the option to invest in their own success.
We're being helicopter parents with our vendors, protecting them from stuff they don't need to be protected from. Let's help.
Yeah.
Let's charge them a little bit more so we can bring more shoppers to their booth.
Yeah, it takes money to spend money. And
for sure.
It takes money to spend money. It takes money to make money.
It takes money. You can't spend money without money.
But yeah, and I always, as a vendor, I appreciated okay, the news comes to our market. And that doesn't just magically happen. That takes, the market pays somebody to do PR and marketing to bring that out. Or, you'd open a local publication and there would be the farmers market logo in there. And that doesn't just magically happen. That takes funds to do. And so I think just communicating that to your vendors is really vital, and recognizing as a market manager that you really can do so much if you just ask for a little bit more.
Yeah. And then I think showing your market vendors and farmers that you're working hard, you're on time, you're closing the street on time, you're making sure that the vendors aren't, the vendors next to them aren't hanging out of their booth or, doing something unsavory or breaking down early and affecting their sales. I mean, you're sticking to the rules yourself. You have a good team. You guys are in uniforms. You can show that you're taking that money and really investing it in the market. I know that some market managers are a little more casual and maybe aren't as present, and the market's kind of is what it is. So if you're raising your fee and then not clearly doing something with that fee, that might leave a little bad taste in your vendors' mouths. But it's really easy just to show your vendors that you're going to take that extra increase and reinvest it for everyone's benefit. So just make sure that you're explaining that to them, you're being clear and consistent, and that you're showing them that you're taking that fee and really using it the most efficiently that you can and reinvesting it in the market. And then we always say, even if you just give your vendors a little holiday card or a t-shirt or a water bottle or something as a thank you, make sure they know that this is a, symbiotic relationship. We're giving, we're taking.
On the same team.
We're all on the same team here. Yeah. And you appreciate them and all of those things. Make sure that you have that kind of attitude about it as well. I think that goes a long way for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so get out there, put some trust in your farmers and vendors that they'll understand that investing money is going to come right back to them and make everybody a success.
We give you permission.
That's right.
Signing off.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to MarketWurks for helping farmers market managers by putting all of the tools to succeed in one place, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast. Find more information and sign up by clicking the MarketWurks logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.